Under the heavens, at the summit of the broken mountain peaks, two shadows proudly stood. As the wind blows, their clothes made fluttering sound. The reason why everyone below the mountains were dumbfounded was that they finally saw the outcome of this battle. On the mountain top, everywhere on the Shamboard King Fei's body, neck, face, earlobes, shoulder bone, arm, waist, there were thick and thin wounds. Each wound looked as if it was opened up gently by a razor. No scars could be seen, but blood kept on coming out from these subtle wounds, forming little blood beads and then drops. And then, the drops ultimately became a little stream along that esoteric armor of his, down to those gloves that were repaired with black dragon scales, and then dripping onto the mountain top below his feet. And on the South Mountain peak, Fei's opponent, the Golden Knight Chris Sutton, with a golden spear in hand that was slightly tilted and pointing towards the sky. Not a single trace of dust was on his golden armor. His stalwart body stood straight upright, and the mountain-top wind blew wildly, making his blonde hair flow like a waterfall. He was as dazzling as the sun. There was not a single trace of injury on his body, and he stood there like a mountain. The Shamboard King was defeated? The Golden Executive Knight won? Seeing this scene, the two crowds began reacting completely different below the twin towering mountains. The Golden Knights of the Imperial Night Palace raised the long spears in their hands up high and cheered, not even trying to hide their fanatical worship of their leader at all. Then, behind those people, on top of a thin horse with withered hair, the insidious-looking old man with a goatee finally smiled and satisfyingly nodded. No one knew what he was thinking about. And then on the Shamboard side, Pete, Czech, Oleg, and Torres, those three frowned as they observed the battle situation over and over. Judging by the level of injury on His Majesty and the Golden Knight, it seemed like Fei lost. However, the three also had a strange feeling that they were forgetting about something. Ah, Alexander. He's hurt. Inside the elder princess's magic carriage, the blonde lowly Emma tightly covered her mouth. There were tears flashing at the corner of her eyes. At that moment, the little lowly seemed to have forgotten that the guy at the mountaintop was the noble king, and she was just a maid, yet she unexpectedly called the king by his name. The elder princess's deep blue eyes still seemed as calm as always. The startled look instantly flashed past her eye. Beside her, the little girl Angela, who had always been very quiet, still had her beautiful eyes wide open, looking at the figure that was covered in blood, as if he had just crawled out from a bloody pool. A magical light shined past Angela's eyes. It wasn't panic or nervousness, but an unprecedented belief and calmness. At the front of both armies, the big black dog and the strange wolf beast seemed to have detected something. The rolling thunder-like low roar sounded from both throats. Their eyes were locked onto each other, and all the fur on their backs erected and became steel needle-like. The two beasts released a dangerous scent that would terrify everyone. A thunderbolt suddenly flashed between the clouds. The ear-deafening thunder suddenly lingered beside the ears of everyone that lived in St. Petersburg. The black fortress towered into the cloud, and the tip of the tower was like a sword inserted into the deepest region of heaven. On the top of the tower, in front of a curved window, a big and tall man with knife-like brows suddenly revealed a face of surprise. His vision traveled past tens of thousands of miles, and it seemed that he saw something very surprising. Then he thoughtfully brushed his chin and smiled. Interesting. I did not expect such an interesting ending. This really made me more and more look forward to how things unfold in the future. Ah-ha-ha-ha. Completely unexpected. A big surprise. Maybe the Zenith's military exercise will become more interesting this time. Great. Worth the anticipation. Hee. Another Empire elite is born? Not long ago in the skies above the Empire's capital, a few terrifyingly powerful spiritual presences awakened. They seemed to have sensed something, and with surprise, they swept through the overcast sky and disappeared immediately after. The dark clouds above the Empire's capital seemed to have become more intense and gloomy. At the tip of the two mountains. I'm curious. Did that woman Paris ask you to deal with me? Fei suddenly asked. Blood kept seeping out of his thin wounds. Despite the barbarian's powerful physical strength, the remaining silver battle energy left inside his wounds couldn't be expulsed right away. It's just like countless invisible wind blades constantly cutting into the wound, pulling it open again the moment it started healing. The terrifying residual battle energy had entered Faye's body when the two clashed earlier. When faced with a terrifying opponent, for someone like Faye that liked to fight head-on, it was impossible to avoid any injury. After being silent for a moment, the Golden Knight finally spoke. Lady Paris forbade me to come look for trouble from you. However, as one of the 10 execution knights of the Imperial Night Palace, do I need a reason to look for a barbaric king's trouble? Poor savage, all the things you did, every one of them is enough to put you on the execution seat of the Night Palace. Haha. Is it? That's a shame. You don't seem to be able to do it. Faye smiled and said. Right after his voice faded, something strange happened. Click. With a slight sound, almost inaudible yet like a clock tower that resounded between heaven and earth, a tiny crack appeared in Sutton's golden spear. Then, with the click sounds becoming more and more frequent, more and more cracks appeared on the golden spear and very quickly covered the entire spear, as if someone used ink and drew countless black lines on the whole golden spear. Then, immediately after, this golden spear that Sutton paid a significant price to forge and had treated like his own life, just like a beautiful porcelain jar that suddenly fell on the ground, crumbled into pieces and became like the dust as the wind blew past. It was like tens of thousands of golden butterflies dancing and withering, and soon ceasing to exist. I swear, the next time I see you, you will be sent to the judgment seat of the Night Palace. The young Golden Knight boy saw the golden spear that turn into dust and get blown away by the wind. He couldn't help but felt a wave of pain. However, he wasn't surprised because he already noticed a long time ago that his weapon was already shattered by his opponent's terrifying fist force back when the battle initiated. The spear was just barely holding together by his own energy. Next time we meet, the result will be the same. Faye pouted in disdain. If it wasn't for so many eyes watching from below the mountain, maybe this so-called genius wouldn't even have the second chance. After a purple flaming light flashed past, the wounds on Faye's body miraculously healed. In an instant, Faye endured severe pain when he used brute force to expel the already weakening sharp hostile energy residue from his opponent. Accompanied by the vitality potion that he drank in secret, those tiny and dense wounds that were consistently bleeding out blood bleeds all disappeared without a trace. If it wasn't for the remaining traces that the Golden Knight's lance left on the armor, no one could tell that Faye just went through a shocking fight. In contrast to the sudden revival of Faye, the Golden Knight's situation was in a nosedive. Clicking click, clicky click, clickety click. The faint yet continuous sounds kept coming. This time, the thing that shattered like glass was that glorious, awesome-looking golden armor of the knight. It was the same as a few seconds ago when his golden lance was broken. Cracks began spreading from bottom to top, all the way to the helmet. Ultimately, not even this set of golden armor could maintain its integrity, and suddenly shattered off Sutton's body like a cracked egg, drifting away in the wind. Along with the drifting wind, there was also the lining of the armor and cloth below the armor. As one of the majestic execution knights of the Imperial Night Palace, the Chris Sutton that was known as the Golden Sun Knight, now actually stood at the top of the southern mountaintop all naked in front of everyone's eyes. From top to bottom, all naked. Even the most private part, his Sutton Jr. aka his little brother wasn't covered. Barbarian, the humiliation you gave me today, one day, I will let you pay back in hundredfold. The Golden Knight Sutton's eyes burned with a flaming spirit. He stood so straight and tall on the mountain top without the slightest feeling of awkwardness with his nakedness. Or maybe it was because of the fact that he was naked, he had to stand with his back even more straight. It wasn't that bad to be naked, but what drove him crazy was how easily he was defeated. However, this young genius character still showed how he differed from ordinary people. He maintained his calm and stood against the wind. But suddenly, something terrifying happened. Streams of blood mist started pouring out of this Golden Knight's body without any warning. There was not the slightest wound on Sutton's body. The blood seemed to be flowing directly from the pores. It turned out that his muscle, skeleton, and the 5 organs had long been injured by Faye's savage punch. Before now, he had been trying to suppress the injury with powerful energy. But until this moment, he finally couldn't hold it anymore, and the injury instantly broke out like a flood. With his mind slowly entering the abyss, the Golden Knight couldn't even stand steady. He staggered a little, and finally he could no longer support himself, and fell towards the bottom of the mountain like a piece of wood after being blown by the wind. Oh right, I forgot to tell you. I'm not fucking interested at all about the retarded fight for the Empire shit throne. You better not mess with me. Also, my patience is the same as yours, not very good. Before completely losing consciousness, Sutton heard that last sentence from that barbarian king. The crowd exclaimed under the mountain. Sudden turn of event. No one would have thought that at the end of battle, the outcome would take such a dramatic turn in an instant. The Golden Knight that once seemed to be at an absolute advantage actually lost completely within an instant. His golden armor and even his golden lance were destroyed after the battle. Everyone below the mountain became completely dumbfounded, especially those 100 or so Golden Knights. They all just stared as Chris Sutton's body fall from the mountain top. They were all scared shitless, and couldn't be in time to rescue him even if they wanted to. Just at that moment, the giant wolf-like beast released fierce light out of its eyes. With a low roar and a stomp with all four legs, it immediately turned into a stream of yellow thunder. Using the broken rocks as stepping stones, it charged up and firmly caught the falling Golden Knight Sutton. Then this bastard roared towards Faye once. Knowing that it was no match, the beast just carried the fainted Golden Knight on its back and ran like lightning towards the Empire capital's direction. Hurry! Protect His Excellency! The knights of the Imperial Night Palace shouted. They just ignored the Chambord expedition army in front of them, turned around and chased after that mount. At the back of the army, the old man with a goatee's face completely paled. He became dumbfounded for a few seconds. Then, with a look of disbelief in his eyes, he took an unwilling look at the figure still standing on the northern mountain top. A cold feeling rose in his heart, and suddenly he turned around, smacked his skinny horse on the ass and ran like flying. Swish dash! A sharp wind pierced the sky, whipping past his ear and landing on a 6 meters high boulder on the side of the path. The boulder collapsed into pieces, and dust was everywhere. Anyone that dares to abet others to become the enemy of Chambord, the end for them will be like this rock. Chambord King's voice sounded beside this insidious-looking old man's ear like roaring thunder, and the goatee old man Alpha just felt his heart trembling and didn't dare to make any excuse. He just covered the cut on his ear in embarrassment and fled in panic, his gray hair flying all over the sky. Faye stood on the north mountain top and watched the Golden Knight group of people disappeared into the horizon. In the course of the brief fight, Faye incisively and vividly felt the arrogant character of the so-called Golden Sun Knight, one of the 10 execution knightage of the Imperial Night Palace. Although he was arrogant to the extreme, due to the subtle connection between martial art practitioners, Faye was almost sure that all the underhanded tactics of poisoning water, summoning wolves, breaking mountains from earlier weren't instructed by this proud knight. Faye carefully thought about some of the reasons. He soon fixed his eyes on the wretched and sinister goatee old man that was standing behind all the knights, and he immediately made sense of everything. This old man should be a character that was similar to an advisor. Just by his perverted look, all the events happened earlier could presumably be instructed by this person who thought himself as someone super smart. Towards characters like these that always plotted against others' backs like a snake, Faye never had any favorable impressions. If it wasn't for that Faye didn't have any concrete evidence that everything was indeed instructed by this guy, the goatee old man right now would have probably become a pile of diced meat. Taking off the magic armor that was already reaching the bottom limit of its durability, Faye cleaned up the shirt on his body, and then jumped straight down the northern mountain top, activating the barbarian skill. Jump a few times, flashed a few times, and instantly arrived at the bottom of the mountain. Long live your majesty! The most excited Warden Oleg resumed his kiss-ass nature instantly, raised his arms, and then a loud kiss-ass statement flew right out. But this time no one laughed at Oleg, because they were all doing the same thing as Oleg. Even Pete's Czech, who was always silent, felt that his whole body was blood-boiled, as if something in his brain was about to explode. Incredible, too incredible. Before then, everyone from Chambord knew that their king was very strong. But no one would expect him to be powerful enough to completely confront one of the Empire's execution knights. Woof woof woof. The big black dog also joined in, cheerfully waving its tail, opening its mouth and then let out a loud roar. Alexander. A pleasant voice sounded from a distance. The future Queen Angela was like a happily dancing beautiful white butterfly, picking up her white dress, jumping down from the elder princess's magic carriage in the distance, sprinting past the crowd and jumping into Faye's arms, smelling the faint fragrance coming to his nose, feeling the soft and warm body in his arms. Faye felt warmth in his heart. The so-called hero and beauty. Even a steel-like man would wish there to be a beauty appearing beside him after a battle of life and death, and give him a warm embrace. And at this moment, Faye felt the volcano eruption-like passion of a young girl. After feeling touched, he also felt a little guilty. The battle just now probably made her worry a lot. On the magic carriage in the distance, the other two women's expressions were also delightful. The blonde lowly Emma started smiling, even though the snow-white skin of hers still had traces of tears left. Looking at Angela and Alexander embracing each other in everyone's cheers. At this moment, this little lowly with a little freckles and a little stubborn personality suddenly felt an unprecedented calmness and ease. In her bright eyes, the scenes of Angela taking care and protecting the Alexander in the past who didn't have a clear mind began surfacing again, and the elder princess, her ocean wave-like eyes observed the place where Angela just sat in the carriage. On the faint purple velvet blanket there was a clear fingerprint crease. It came from being gripped by someone under extreme tension. Seeing this, the elder princess's slightly skinny yet delicate cheeks emerged a smile. I thought this little girl really was confident in her love and wasn't worried at all, but this is actually the case. However, this wise elder princess didn't realize, for a simple and young little girl, how difficult and courageous it is for her to forcefully maintain confidence towards her loved one in such an intense situation. At a little distance, the Soros caravan was stunned. The shock in their hearts could hardly be described. Especially manager Harry Redknapp, the charming young woman Sherry in the red dress and the young swordsman in a white robe beside her. They all found what they saw to be very hard to believe. Perhaps the people from Chambord didn't know what the victory of this battle means. But these three knew. It was the Golden Sun Knight Chris Sutton, one of the 10 execution knightage of the Imperial Night Palace, the most admired super genius of the entire empire, the future star of the empire's martial arts. Although Sutton was only 16 years old and had slightly less experience in comparison to the other 9 knights, he was still one of the symbols of the Imperial's cutting-edge force. A subsidiary kingdom's king being able to defeat an execution knight of the Imperial Night Palace, that was something that had never happened before. It was only the shadowy, one-sword legend that was able to do this, but he had never challenged an execution knight like this. In short, the Chambord king had created history. If in a more complicated view, Redknapp could almost be certain that the result of this battle could affect the future direction of this heated battle for the Empire's throne. Now the Empire's situation was becoming growingly complex, with Empire Yashin's body weakening by day, and the two princes Dominguez and Arshavin each holding significant power with a lot of ministers supporting them. The infighting between them was becoming increasingly hot both under broad daylight and in the dark. However, being able to secure the neutral parties like the Night Palace and the several Empire martial saints had been the top priority of these two princes, because the cutting-edge martial strength would play a crucial role in the battle for the throne. But at this sensitive moment, what does it mean to have a young elite on par of the strength of Night Palace suddenly appearing out of the blue? It's just like a legendary sword that could deliver a fatal blow to the enemy had suddenly appeared, and whoever had this sword in his hand would have a higher chance to ascend to the power and glory of the supreme throne. Looking at the almost destroyed Twin Towers, the manager in black robe was filled with mixed emotions. He clearly knew, after this stop, Chambord King Alexander's fame would be thoroughly casted. From now on, he was afraid that no subsidiary kingdom within Zenith Empire would dare to provoke the prestige of the Chambord King. And then within the Empire, this news would spread sooner or later, and by then, He was afraid that the Shamboard King would be the focus of all major powers, and as for whether he will become the most honorable guest or a hindrance, it will depend on which prince this young king chooses to support. And the broken twin mountains will always be a testament to the horrifying battle that had taken place here today. It may not take a long time before poets began gathering here to gather inspirations. Perhaps they will really create a lot of beautiful and magnificent poetry ballads to celebrate the rise of the genius-like young man, who would ultimately become the attention of the whole continent one day. The cheering crowd took a long time to calm down. This time, everyone's eyes on Faye completely changed. Especially those guards of the Soros caravan that were still looking down on this subsidiary kingdom's peasant king, who was used to seeing all kinds of nobles and elites. However, the way they looked at Faye was filled with respect and worship now. This was the natural reaction of the weak to the strong. On the land of Azeroth governed by the rule of the jungle, the strong were respected, and all issues were resolved with fists and weapons. The team set out after a slight reorganization. The victory of this battle dispelled all the notions of sneak attacks ahead of the expedition team's journey. Now with an elite capable of defeating the execution knights on the team, unless someone was really tired of living, people wouldn't even have enough time to suck up to Faye, let alone sneak attacking. It was basically suicidal. So everyone advanced full of confidence. Faye comfortably rode on the big black dog's back with the beauty in his arms. He went past the twin towering mountains. Now, there was only a hilly region ahead of them, and then it would be a vast plain. The expedition team's remaining journey would be a smooth road with no more danger, and it would be expected that they would arrive at the empire capital in a little more than a day. However, just as they were about to pass the hilly region, Faye suddenly looked back. Just at that moment, don't know why, Faye suddenly had a feeling inside his heart. A strange kind of feeling lingered in his heart. As if in the distant the Shamboard city encountered something. Rumble, the whole prairie trembled and the earth was wailing. The cavalry that was like a flood appeared in the distance on the border between sky and earth. The long flags flying in the wind were like many little black dragons, ferociously advancing in the sky. All the flags were black, and on top of them there was a simple and ugly painting of a steel knife dripping blood and a white skull. This was an unknown army completely dressed in black armor. The leading cavalry unit's horses, armor, helmet, and armor had no symbol or markings. It was obvious that they deliberately hid their identity. All 2,000 cavalry soldiers were like a black torrent that was murderously galloping over. In front of them, on a slightly uplifted hill, a red figure and a black figure stood up tall, like two towering stones. They fearlessly faced the torrent, quietly waiting for something. The distance between the two sides was getting closer. This is the Taurus Golden Knight Didier Drogba under the Shamboard King's command. The advancing army should listen up. You guys already invaded Shamboard's territory. I will give you 10 breaths of time to turn around and leave, otherwise we will kill without pardon. The knight on the hill suddenly shouted. His voice rolled out so loudly that it pierced the heavens and traveled far away, unexpectedly suppressing the sound of thousands of horses galloping. But pew! The other side's response was an even louder arrow. With a burst of deafening wailing that pierced through space, the arrow was shrouded in a faint color of flame, akin to a falling meteor from heaven. Not good. Didier, be careful. Lampard's face changed. He saw that the arrow contained a strong fire element with terrifying and lightning-like momentum. That was an arrow shot out by an elite that was at least an intermediate 3-star. He was worried that Drogba would pay a price for underestimating the shot, so he took a step up and punched into the sky. A silver thunder burst out from his fist and hit directly onto the arrow. After a big boom, an explosion appeared in the sky, and an invisible air wave scattered towards all directions, destroying all plantations nearby. Son of a b. Show some respect. Drogba flew into rage. He looked around, reached and took down the giant axe that was hanging on the side of his horse. Then, with both hands using full strength, he threw it towards the enemy. After the transformation by the Hulk potion, both arms had at least tens of thousands of pounds of force. The axe was rotating and whistling frantically, seemingly to even be a level higher than that red arrow. This axe was actually thrown out more than 200 meters by him. The knight that shot the arrow before saw the situation and didn't dare to block head-on. With the flaming red energy flashing on his body, he instantly leaped into the air and dodged it. His movement was extremely agile, and he returned to the back of his horse with another flash. He was clearly an elite. However, the ones that followed behind him weren't so lucky. Before the first one could react, he was sliced directly by the giant axe. Without letting out a single sound, he was hacked into halves, with the bottom half still riding on the horse while the upper half already fallen to the ground and trampled into minced meat. Even so, the axe kept on going with the same momentum, and the 6 or 7 fully armored knights also met the same tragic end. Instantly, a blood-red countercurrent appeared inside the black torrent of knights. "Damn it! Charge and kill him!" the fire element knight shouted, pulling out the long sword on his waist and gritting his teeth. The black torrent quickened their speed of propulsion and became even more blatantly mad. Pew 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 pew. Sharp sounds pierced the sky, and 4 long swords covered in all kinds of energy light instantly began bursting out random shots from the black torrent. "Oh shit! There are pros on the enemy side. The 2 of us can't handle them." The moment Lampard heard the sound, his face changed immediately. Those sword shots showed great force, meaning that there were at least 4 elites that were level 3 and above. In addition to the 2,000 cavalry troops, the enemy force was not something that Drogba and him could handle on their own. "Frank, don't worry. Let's just give these bastards some greeting gift." Drogba said as he took off 3 other axes. Under the terrifying strength, the giant axes spun like tornadoes that are about to crush the dimension, and they set off 3 more blood countercurrents in the opposition's black torrent. "Damn it! Sinful people! Kill!" Before even encountering, Drogba's 4 flying axes already killed 40 or so people, making those 4 masters at the front that were flashing different colors of energy light can't help but roar in anger. In the blink of an eye, the distance between the 2 sides were less than 100 meters, and the sky-covering arrow rain began coming down towards those 2. "Quick, retreat!" The 2 jumped on Crimson Flame beasts and raised dust behind their asses. The Tier 4 Crimson Flame beasts' speed far exceeded the military horses. They instantly left the battlefield and began retreating towards Chambord City. 3 kilometers away, more than 100 of Chambord City's soldiers were standing on a hill. The one in the lead had black fall-like hair and was covered in an unique black armor. There was a 5 feet long, 5 fingers wide long sword by his waist, and his face was all majestic, solemn, and full of justice. This was the military overlord of Chambord City, Brooke. Chambord's reinforcements were here, about 5 meters from where the reinforcement was stationed. There were 600 to 700 rescued, exhausted Chambord mine slaves that were rushing into the city under the help of compatriots that came out to welcome them. As long as they entered the city, then the Chambord army could take advantage of the terrain to defend, and it might not even be a problem to completely counter-annihilate these enemies that just showed up of nowhere. "Lord Brooke, there's a change in situation. There are 4 aces in the enemy formation." Frank and Drogba came to Brooke and reported all the details about the encounter. Brooke's face changed, but he quickly assumed his calmness. "No problem. We just need to stall them for a quarter of an hour, and we can retreat back to the city to defend." He frowned and thought for a second, and at the next instant, a series of decisive orders quickly flowed down the army. Brooke's prestige was high. Everyone immediately took command and began preparing. Very soon, the rumbling black iron torrent appeared in their sight, and those 4 aces that were flashing different color of energy were most noticeable. After entering Zenit Empire's territories, both the Chambord's Expeditionary Force and Soros Merchant Group were relieved. In this imperial territory, no affiliated kingdom dared to attack the people of Chambord. Otherwise, even the king of Level 1 affiliated kingdom would be arrested by the Executive Knights and be executed for committing crimes such as treason or conspiracies. There were no room for refute, and there won't be any hesitation or exceptions. This was the power of the parent empire. Fei, who came to his parent empire for the first time, was very curious. He could clearly sense that the atmosphere in the parent empire's territories was completely different from other affiliated kingdoms. The surroundings seemed stricter. As soon as Chambord's force entered the territories, Faye saw numerous guard posts and security blockades that were hidden at different places. Other than that, there were more fully armed Imperial Cavaliers who were patrolling the area. They were formed into many teams, and their paths and time management were so strict that it seemed like they formed a huge net looking down from the sky. With tall watchtowers, they could guarantee that no one could get into the area without being discovered. The expeditionary force from Chambord and Soros Merchant Group only proceeded about a dozen kilometers forward into the territory, but they were stopped and questioned about 10 times by the soldiers of Zenith. Their questions were so detailed that they made Faye feel like he was being treated like an enemy. This phenomenon surprised Faye, but at the same time, Faye felt strange about it. The atmosphere seems strange. This is weird. Even if Zenith's military power is great, it shouldn't be this strict. This gave me the feel of preparing for a big war that is about to occur. Very interesting. Faye carefully observed and wondered to himself. Maybe it's because of the military exercise that is about to occur. There would be elite soldiers from 250 affiliated kingdoms, so they have to be cautious about it. Faye could only think of this one explanation. It had been a day since the battle at Dual Tower Mountain. Right now, Faye didn't relax. Because of his good habits, he was thinking about the gains that he made from the battle with Chris Sutton. That battle stimulated Faye, and it brought him the pressure he once felt when he arrived at this world. He had the feeling that he was about to meet more powerful warriors and encounter more challenges. He had to try his best to improve his strength so he could handle the storm that was about to arrive. For the past day, Faye made a lot of progress from thinking the battle through again. To Faye, the biggest takeaway was the barbarians' fighting technique. There was one thing that was true on this broad and big Azeroth continent that gods couldn't even avoid. Both warriors and mages had their own unique secret fighting styles. Since the creation and the improvements made by many generations of geniuses, these techniques contained a deep understanding of power and could deal unbelievable amounts of damage. Among them, warrior fighting techniques and mage chanting spells were the most powerful techniques. The profession of mages had an unlimited need for money and resources due to its uniqueness. Therefore, there were less of them. Faye had only met a few mages since his arrival in this world, and most of them were not powerful. In fact, the most powerful mage he encountered was the former head minister of Chambord, Bazar. Bazar was actually only a 4-star mage. Since he didn't have a mage master, he was considered a grassroots mage. He had very limited knowledge, so he was lucky that he advanced to a 4-star mage. After the advancement, he didn't get to learn any level 4 magic spell, so he didn't utilize his power. He was like a soldier without a weapon. He couldn't fight at 100% capacity. This sequences of events gave Faye an inaccurate impression about the power of mages. Except mages, Faye had already met a ton of powerful master who utilized their warrior energies. The strongest among them were the white-haired elder on Paraside and Zenith's god of war Andrew Arshivan. But the person who brought Faye the most shock was the young Golden Sun Knight Chris Sutton when they fought on the Dual Tower Mountains. This executive knight's warrior combat technique, Gold Lance Tsunami Strike, surprised Faye. It was the first time that Faye clearly realized that such a technique could let a peak 5-star warrior deal the damage of a mid-tier 6-star warrior. This top-level combat technique had completely flipped Faye's understanding about warrior combat techniques. He was quite proud of the techniques such as lightning speed fists and corpse-piling shockwave that he created. But he was forced to swallow the fact that these techniques he created couldn't match up to the Gold Lance Tsunami Strike in terms of sudden explosive power. This unexpected finding reconfirmed Faye's determination of finding higher-ranked and higher-quality energy training scrolls. Only after consulting with high-rank scrolls could he use his assassin mode to add more energy connections channels in the training scrolls that he created. If Faye could add more connections and utilize their mystic powers, he could create combat techniques that could increase the explosive power of a warrior in a greater degree compared to Gold Lance Tsunami Strike. Other than that, Faye discovered more forms of fighting for his barbarian character during the fight with Golden Sun Knight. Didn't matter if it was warrior energy or the physical strength of Faye's barbarian character, they were all forms of power. They weren't different on the empirical level. Unfortunately, Faye, who was under the barbarian mode, was only able to utilize the strength in a very instinctual and basic way to fight. Although this style of fighting was unconventional and did take his enemies by surprise, it was too simple compared with the fancy warrior combat techniques before Fei could actually learn the high-level fighting techniques of Barbarian. On top of not being able to suddenly increase the damage being dealt, he lacked long-ranged attacks other than throwing stuff. From that fight, Fei was surprised that he found another way of using the Barbarian's power, using fist marks that could be condensed in the air to attack an opponent from afar. During the fight with the Golden Sun Knight, Fei entered a very strange battle state when he was extremely battle-thirsty under pressure. At that moment, it felt like every single cell in his body was activated. In that state, his barbarian physical force created something special under the full unleash of power. Fei smashed a series of semi-transparent fist marks that were the size of car wheels into the air using his devastating brutal force. These fist marks were crystal-like, and the detail of the fists such as knuckles was vividly displayed on every single fist mark. What surprised Fei the most was that every single fist mark contained 100% of the force that he smashed out. These forces were enveloped into the fist marks for a short period of time before they would just disappear, and Fei was able to stack up to 30 to 40 fist marks and strike the opponent all at once. Together, the explosive force and the damage was equivalent to 30 to 40 Feis attacking at the same time. The damage dealt by this strike already reached the attack power of a 6-star warrior, and this technique was comparable to high-ranked warrior combat techniques. This was the real reason why Fei was able to turn things around when he was already injured by the Metal Warrior energy and defeat Sutton, who had the Gold Lance Tsunami strike. This also made Fei understand that he should really obtain some combat techniques if he wanted to win battles at this level. This was Fei's new understanding of his barbarian mode. For the last day after the fight, Fei had tried multiple times to enter the state he was in before and smash out transparent fist marks. He was able to master this technique after a lot of practice, and he also discovered that the strength, physical instinct, battle sense, and fighting experience of his level 38 barbarian character allowed him to stack up to 46 fist marks. This was his limit. After 46 fist marks, the first fist mark would start dispersing into the air, so he could no longer stack them together. The strike with 46 stacks dealt the damage of a low to mid-tier 6-star warrior, which on its own was impressive already. This fist mark stacking technique is not inferior to those combat techniques, and I created it. Therefore, I have to give it a bossy name. Let me call it Skyfrost Fist. Haha. Fei thought about a TV series called Wind and Cloud, and the martial art technique of the senior disciple named Qing. He thought the name was cool, so he had no shame of stealing it. In fact, he was so proud of his idea that he started to laugh out loud. After the battle with Sutton, Fei felt like he had opened up a new gate to power. He felt like the ceiling he once felt was lifted as he knew he could use the skills of different characters from Diablo World agilely to create more versatile fighting styles. To Fei, who was a thoughtful otaku, this was really fun. So now I have an offensive technique, what about a defensive one? Fei thought. The battle style of a barbarian could be simplified into one sentence. Only attack and no defense, only forward and no backing off. But as a king, Fei felt like the appearance of bleeding and being at the verge of death after every battle didn't fit his image too well. However, he wasn't able to concentrate 100% on the stuff that was on his mind. Because behind him, in the direction of the Shamboard Kingdom, Fei felt like something was calling him for some reason. The vague yet sudden and urgent calling and summoning caused Fei to zone out and be absent-minded. A day before, outside of Shamboard, the autumn wind was blowing through the dry grass. Charge! Conquer Shamboard in one go! For warriors who were at least at the 4-star rank charged on their horses towards Shamboard with different attributed warrior energy flame enveloping them. Behind them, there were a couple kings who were dressed in shiny armors with golden crowns on their heads. Their expressions were vicious as they didn't hide their murderous intents. Following them, there were more than 2,000 black armored cavaliers who were charging like a black flood. The iron hooves stepped on the ground and caused dust to fly into the air. And in the dust, several black flags with a skeleton head and blade with blood dripping off of it fluttered in the wind like black dragons. The entire group was like a pack of hungry wolves that were charging towards a group of fatty delicious sheep. Finally, the continuous mountains and beautiful Shamboard Castle appeared in the eyes of this bunch of red-eyed invaders. Charge! Kill them all! Wipe out Shambord. Conquer them. Ha ha ha. Men over the height of the wheel shall all be killed. After seeing the target, every invader started to scream and shout as if they were vicious jackals who smelled blood. About 15 minutes ago, two guys who called themselves the Golden Knights under the King of Shambord appeared in front of them arrogantly and ran away after a little defense. That provoked and stimulated the morale of the invaders. The kings with gold crowns on their head laughed as they commanded their soldiers when they finally saw the castle. The long and loud bugle sounded, and the black armored cavaliers slowed down their speed. Each formation kept some distance between them, and they were adjusting their pace to save up energy for the last necessary crazy charge. But at this moment, a change occurred. Whoosh dash! Whoosh! Whoosh! A ton of arrows suddenly shot out of the hill on the right of the cavaliers like a dark shadow. The hungry locust-like arrows screamed as they dashed into these soldiers. Without their guards up, more than 20 cavaliers on the right side of the formations whined as they fell off of their horse and got stomped into meat paste by their peers who were behind them. There is an ambush. They are mounted archers from Shambord. Be careful, they are on the right. Shit! They had already discovered us. Haha! What ambush are you talking about? There are only 30 of them. How dare they challenge us? Khalid, take a team of 50 men and bring back those bastards' head to me in 10 minutes. The invaders quickly discovered this raid. After seeing the number of Shambord soldiers, all of them relaxed. A king with the gold crown on his head waved his sword, and a team of more than 100 cavaliers laughed as they broke off from the big group and charged towards the archers of Shambord who were hiding by the hill. These cavaliers disappeared behind the hill as everyone expected a slaughter. But in less than 2 minutes, something occurred as that king expected his men to return. Whoosh! Whoosh! A series of arrows were shot out of the bush under the hill on the right of them. It was surprising. The black armored cavaliers who were charging forward didn't expect this, and many of them fell to the ground. However, the attackers soon showed themselves when more than 50 cavaliers were killed. They were another team of mounted archers from Shambord. There were only about 20 of them, but they cleverly used the hill and the tall grasses to hide themselves. Although there were only a few of them, they were great at shooting. Almost every arrow that was shot from them took down an enemy. However, the invaders didn't really spot this fact as most of them were just charging by. The only thing that the commanders of the invaders saw was their numbers. It was obvious that 20 more people couldn't threaten a 2,000-men force. Another gold-crowned king waved his sword, and another team of 100 cavaliers separated from the group and charged at these archers. But soon, the invaders sensed the abnormality. There were still volleys of arrows that were being shot at them from two sides, and there were black armored cavaliers falling down from their horses continuously. In the last 10 minutes, they had suffered more than 400 casualties. What was more bone-chilling was that both teams of more than 100 cavaliers who were after these archers didn't return. They were probably dead from what they could tell. At the same time, about 20 mounted archers appeared behind them. These archers were fast since their horses were top quality. They used a guerrilla tactic where they would back off after they successfully attacked and shoot at them from afar when the situation seemed right. These archers were like the invaders' tails. The invaders just couldn't get rid of them. Under such harassment, the high morale and the unified formation seemed to be a little shattered. "Mister, what should we do?" A gold-crowned king's face changed color. He even asked and addressed the warrior who was charging at the front and had energy flame around as Mr. Dick Allen. "Each of you take 400 cavaliers to clear all the mounted archers of Shambord in 20 minutes. Don't let any single one of them survive. Gullo, you take 100 cavaliers to watch our backs and make sure that the opponents won't harass us anymore from the back. Everyone else, don't worry about the archers on both sides and charge at full speed. Something must have happened. That is why they are harassing us to buy time. Sound the bugle. Charge. Speed up." One of the 4 warriors who were leading the group shouted and commanded as if he was the leader. The other 3 warriors who were charging beside him nodded. 2 of them waved their swords and shouted at the same time. Their voices were as loud as the thunder, and each of them led 400 men to break off of the main group lightly and attacked the archers of Shambord on each side. With two mysterious warriors leading the cavaliers, most of the arrows that were shot at them were crushed into pieces by these two warriors' energy flames. With little casualties, they quickly approached the archers of Chambord who were hiding behind the grasses and hills. The other warrior led 100 cavaliers and left the main group from the left side. They slowed down and stayed behind the group to deal with the archers at the back. Under the lead of that warrior, they quickly stopped the archers from 100 meters away so they couldn't get close. At the same time, the leader of the entire force led more than 1,000 cavaliers to charge at Chambord at an insane speed. The leader of the group was a strong knight who wasn't wearing any helmet. His black curly hair fluttered in the air, and he looked like demon from hell with half of his face twitching and deformed. You couldn't tell his nose apart from his mouth. Everything on his face was like wet mud. It was obvious that his face had been severely burnt. On top of his hideous face, his eyes were pitch black as if he was a demon from hell. This man's face was very calm, as if he discovered Chambord's forces' intention quickly. A smile appeared on his face as he sneered in disdain. As an elite knight from the Imperial Knight Palace, he had been in more than 100 battles, and he had extensive amounts of commanding experience. He believed that he was not inferior to the famous generals and commanders at Zenith, so he didn't think the low-lives from this remote kingdom could fool him with dumb tricks. The resistance of ants. Such bad acting. The knight with the scar face could almost feel the heat from the blood that would appear on his sword soon. At the same time, on a high hill that wasn't far away, Brooke, who was carefully monitoring the invaders, was surprised. He murmured to himself, "There is someone who is great at military strategies in the enemies. This is bad. Adjustments must be mad to the plan." Brooke glanced around and observed the surrounding terrains a bit more as he tried to calculate the possible changes. After he considered both the manpower and the number of star warriors of Chambord and the invaders, he felt helpless as he knew no one at Chambord was able to take on the 4-star warriors who were leading the charge. Once these 4-star warriors couldn't be handled, this battle would be hard to win. On Azeroth continent, masters like star warriors couldn't be ignored. If there was a huge gap between the powerful warriors of the two sides, the party with little manpower could potentially win just because of superior top warriors. Although the defense wall of Chambord was tall and firm, it wasn't enough to block the invasion of 4-star warriors. The only strategy now was to risk everything and take them directly on. Brooke bit his teeth and made a decision. As the man in charge of the military, he wasn't the strongest warrior, and he was very straightforward and a little dull. However, he didn't lack leadership and courage during battle. He had the authority and he was decisive. This was a part of the reasons why Faye placed Brooke on such an important role. At this moment, when faced with danger, Brooke knew that he had to do something impossible to protect Chambord and execute his strategies to prove to everyone that the king didn't pick the wrong person. Chase after them. Kill them all. The thin and short 4-star warrior named Dick charged on his horse with his sword risen. He was really mad. The task of taking care of 30 mounted archers of Chambord with 400 elite cavaliers was easy in his eyes, but he didn't expect his opponents to be this sly and tricky. They were fast, and their archery were exceptional. During this chase, he didn't get to them, and about 100 of his cavaliers who shot down by those archers. This was a great shame to him. After a while, all the arrows of archers from Chambord had their arrows depleted. The mounted archers of Chambord without arrows were like tigers without teeth and claws. They were essentially meat on the chopping board. Ha ha! They are out of arrows, charge. But soon the cavaliers couldn't laugh anymore. The archers of Chambord soon turned to soldiers who threw axes. They all took off the axes that were hanging by the saddle and threw them at the invaders after full rounds of swinging. The axes that were the size of doors flew towards the black-armored cavaliers who were unprepared for this and made them cry out loud. With the backdrop of spurting blood and broken limbs, these axes took away around 50 lives. There was only about 250 cavaliers. They suffered a lot of casualties. Finally, after about 10 minutes of chase, the black-armored cavaliers pushed the mounted archers of Chambord into a forest under a mountain. The horses couldn't run in here freely, so the monkey-like soldiers of Chambord jumped off of the horses and escaped into the forest. Dismount! Run after them! Kill them all. The leader Dick was already raged. He lost his rationality and swore that he would skin those bastards and use them as leather. But soon Dick regretted his actions. Since his cavaliers dismounted and chased into the forest, they were lost in this maze. After a little while, the cavaliers were scattered around the forest. When Dick calmed down and wanted to command all of his men to gather back together, a strong man with a huge black sword on his back appeared in front of him. Dick's pupil instantly contracted. He sensed a sense of danger from this red-haired man. "Who are you?" Dick drew his sword as he enveloped himself in a green warrior energy. "Leo Xianxia Frank Lampard under the Chambord King is here to take away your life." The red-haired strong man stabbed his black sword onto the ground, and then stood there calmly. Although he looked calm, a series of light cracking noises sounded inside of him as strands of white lightning started to pop out of his body. Soon, the white lightning enveloped his body and burnt the plants and trees around him into charcoal and smokes. Lightning-attributed warrior? Dick was surprised. But then an excited expression appeared on his face as he licked his lips and said, "I didn't expect it. A little Chambord kingdom has such a warrior like you. Good, good. Great." The green warrior energy around his grew rapidly as he said, "My hobby is to torture great warriors. This sword has chopped the heads of 36 4-star warriors. You would make the 37th warrior today. You are too talkative." This was Lampard's response. At the same time, on the field to the right of Chambord, in a field with grass that was over 2 meters tall, 4-star warrior Alan, the leader of the other team of cavaliers, encountered the same problem as his peer Dick. Almost half of his cavaliers were killed by the arrows and axes from the mounted archers of Chambord. Under the anger, he led his black-armored men into this field of grass. When he entered this place, he felt like he entered an ocean of green. His opponents tried to divide his team up on purpose, and almost all of his men were scattered around in this field. In front of him now, there were 2 strong men from Chambord who didn't look too friendly. Taurus Xianxia Drogba, Capricorn Xianxia Pierce of Chambord. "You ugly ass, you are dead for sure this time." The 2 men who were big like mountains told Alan who they were as they cracked their knuckles and walked towards him while laughing viciously. "Humph! Idiots! How are you 2 talk to me like that? You guys weren't even 3-star warriors yet." Alan shook the sword in his hand, and the blue water-attributed warrior energy flame exploded as 2 dash of sword strikes pierced towards the throat of the 2 strong men like lightning. "He is a master. We are no match." Both Drogba and Pierce's faces changed color as they sensed their opponent's strength. "Ready? Shoot!" Brooke was still calm. He waved his sword forward and commanded. As his voice sounded in the air, the sounds of bowstrings vibrating resonated. The arrows screamed as they covered all the noises of the surroundings and pierced through people's eardrums. Like locusts flying towards crops, they flew towards the black flood like enemies. In an instant, the black-armored cavaliers fell down like crops under the sickles as they whined. This was a battle, a war, cruel and merciless. As the arrows fell, blood spurted into the sky. The screams soon resonated in the sky. The peers who were charging beside a cavalier screamed as he fell down the horse. He was instantly stomped into meat paste by the cavaliers behind him and lost his breath. Under the full coverage of the arrows, every cavalier had to kick their horses with the spurs on their iron boots to make the sweating horses charge a little bit faster. They had to get close to the archers of Chambord in the shortest amount of time. They tilted their body forward to try to minimize their exposed body as they prayed to gods and hoped that they wouldn't be shot by the arrows that were raining down from the sky. No one was able to dodge this level of arrow coverage, and except the kings who were protected by strong warriors and high-ranking military officials, only the soldiers who were both lucky and strong could survive through this. Fortunately, they could already see their enemies who were on a small hill about 200 meters away. There were only 100 of them, and they formed a defensive formation. Looking from afar, they looked like a bunch of helpless scarecrows. This weak and powerless scene stimulated the testosterone inside every cavalier. Every one of them believed that they could stomp their weak opponent into meat paste after one charge. They also believed that they could soon charge into Chambord Castle like a storm to kill, light things on fire, rape any woman, and take away any valuables and treasures to make their lives more meaningful. They were getting closer and closer. There was only about 50 meters between the two groups. The black armored cavaliers who had great eyesight could already see the scared expressions on the military officers' faces and their trembling legs, since no one was allowed to retreat. This scene stimulated the viciousness in their blood even more. Every one of them roared as they whipped their horses to make them run faster. They swung the weapons in their hands as they expected their weapons to chop off the heads of their enemies. Only the scar-faced knight, while the silver warrior energy enveloping himself with his horse, frowned lightly. He had finally sensed something strange by using his instinct. Now sure when, but a strange yet familiar nose-piercing smell dispersed in the air. When he looked at the black-haired enemy commander, who stood straight under the strange flag of two-dog head on a pair-crossing axe and sword that were dripping down blood, he was frightened. The fact that this commander was standing under the flag like a nail and looked very valiant gave him a bad feeling. Wait, there must be a trap. A lot of thoughts flashed through this scar-faced knight's face. He suddenly thought of something when he smelled this scent in the air more. However, it was too late. Bang, bang, bang. A series of bowstring vibrating noise sounded at this moment. The scar-faced knight looked up, and his pupil contracted as he saw 20 flaming magic arrows. Like 20 meters, they dashed into this black flood with violent burning fires. In the next second, the unbelievable happened. Boom! The ground started to burn as well. That's right, the whole ground caught on fire. The dry grass that were about half a meter tall instantly turned into the flames from hell that were there to take away these cavaliers' lives. Like an erupting volcano, the red-yellowish fire appeared on the ground and licked the charging cavaliers mercilessly. The nose-piercing smell and black smoke were everywhere, and the fire quickly spread and lit the area of a kilometer in radius in just 40 seconds as if it was alive. Almost every cavalier was caught inside this burning fire from hell. The Grim Reaper appeared with no sign. The merciless flames swallowed everything. Numerous cavaliers who were laughing viciously and swinging their weapons were turned into flame men who were screaming and struggling. They all dropped their weapons and slapped the flames on their bodies as they tried to extinguish them. However, the flames ate their bodies as if they were the most passionate lovers on this continent. Soon, these men were killed in the fire one by one. This scene was so majestic and terrifying that it looked like it was comparable to the forbidden fire spells in legends. However, the scar-faced knight clearly knew that this was no forbidden spell. The 20 fire arrows contained the surge of fire elements that he was very familiar with. He knew that they were the simplest and easiest to make fire magic arrows. There was only one reason why the entire field lit up. In this field, where the grass was about half a meter tall, there was a ton of catalysts for fire that were planted here before. These catalysts for fire had a strange smell, and these special minerals could turn a spark into a burning flame in seconds. That was the source of the smell in the air, and this was the reason why the scar-faced knight was uneasy, and this was the reason the fire spread this quickly. Not sure when, but the wind suddenly started to blow. With the help of the wind, the fire grew bigger and stronger. Smoke soared into the sky, and screams and whines resonated on the field. Man on fire! Horses on fire! There was fire everywhere. The scar-faced cavalier unleashed all of his warrior energy and kept the burning fire 3 meters away from him. Everyone listen up. Don't be afraid. Charge! Charge! Charge out of this sea of fire. There is a river at the front. The scar-faced knight leader roared in anger as he commanded the cavaliers to charge forward. The only way of survival was to get away from this fire as soon as possible. Since the wind blew from the north, the field 50 meters away from them where their enemies stood didn't catch on fire. The cavaliers all knew that as long as they charged over their enemy's defensive line, they could escape from their worst nightmare. Charge over. Kill all of those damn people of Chambord. This was the only thought in the scar-faced knight's raging mind in the fire that would envelop the sky. The whining and struggling figures gradually quieted down and stopped moving. However, lives were a miracle of their own. Even though the fire was very violent, quite a lot of the black-armored cavaliers survived. Although they were a mess, their iron armor saved them. Metal conducted heat energy quickly, but it couldn't be lit on fire. With the minimal warrior energy that they had, the cavaliers who lost direction in the smoke protected themselves from the heat and charged out of the fire with the help of their horses were running forward and their scar-faced leader's roar that was amplified by the use of his warrior energy. The 3 gold-crowned kings were less affected by the fire compared to the ordinary soldiers. They had 2-star warriors on their sides protecting them. Although these 2 warriors were only 2-star rank, their warrior energy was enough to envelop the kings within it and push the flames and smoke away. The dry grasses on the plain couldn't sustain the fire for too long. After about 10 minutes, the fire toned down. At the time, about 500 to 600 cavaliers out of 1,500 survived the sea of fire. Behind them, there were still sparks appearing under the ashes. Some of the cavalier hadn't died yet, and their limbs that were seriously deformed by the heat twitched and moved under their reflex. The scene was horrifying. The entire plain was black as if it was hell itself. It was hard to stare at. A stinky burnt smell mixed with the smell of roasted meat dispersed in the air, and people were still able to tell cavaliers from their horses by looking at the charcoal like solid objects. A slight bamming noise would sound infrequently. It was the sound of internal organs exploding inside the horses and the cavaliers who died under the flames. The red and white liquid would pop out of the charcoal like statues and explode like fireworks. The cavalier who charged out of the fire and survived were all elite soldiers who had been to numerous battles. But now, they didn't dare to turn their heads around and see what was happening behind them. The cavaliers who accidentally saw the hell-like scene would instantly bend their backs and puke or cry out loud. Many of them lost their ability to think momentarily as their bodies shivered as if they had lost their souls. It was terrifying, it was hell. The scar-faced leader stopped his horse and looked back as his face darkened. He had been in more than 100 battles, and he had successfully become a knight of the Imperial Knight Palace after he accumulated enough military merits for 10 years. Since the 16-year-old boy first went on the battlefield, the burn scars on his face was his greatest medal. He considered the special executive armor that he was wearing only the second greatest symbol of authority he had, although it was from Imperial Knight Palace. Until now, he thought he grasped the essence of war, and he couldn't suffer any causalities when playing within a remote kingdom. Who knew he didn't just incur some causalities, he failed big time. Team, reform, the scar-faced knight shouted, and the bugle sounds resonated again. Among the 500 to 600 cavaliers who survived, only about 400 of them were able to fight. The cavaliers quickly organized themselves into teams, and they all charged at the hill that was about 50 meters away from them as their scar-faced leader pointed his sword forward and roared, "Revenge!" so loud that it sounded like thunder from the heaven. The scar-faced knight charged at the very front, and the rest of the black-armored cavaliers followed behind him closely. On the hill, under the strange flag of the 2-headed dog and crossed sword and axe, a black-armored commander of Chambord only had less than 50 soldiers around him. It was clear that these soldiers of Chambord were in chaos. It seemed like they didn't anticipate the invader would survive this great fire. It was too late for them to run away even if they wanted to. The invaders could close the gap of 50 meters within 10 seconds. Kill them, chop their heads off, charge into Chambord Castle, and let the bugs of Chambord taste the feeling of getting burnt. This was the only thought on the scar-faced knights and every other invader's mind. They were about to go crazy. Tink, tink, tink. A series of metal collision sounds resonated in the forest. Although it was daytime, the sparks appeared under the trees were still bright and eye-catching. 2 figures flew into the air and crossed each other in a split second. It was a direct duel of sword techniques. When they were in the air, Knight Dick struck out 23 times, and Lampard pierced out 26 times. The consequences of striking 3 times less was significant. When they both landed on the ground again, a wound that was an inch deep appeared on Dick's shoulder, arm, and thigh. Puff, 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 puff. After a short moment of silence, more than a dozen trees that were about a feet in diameter suddenly fell down. The cut on them were so clean that the cut surface could be used as a mirror. These cuts were made by the invisible warrior energy that leaked from the sword strikes. Since the strikes were so subtle, the trees were all right when the warrior energy went through them. Only when the wind blew by did the trees fall. Great sword techniques. The 4-star warrior Dick turned around and looked at the huge black sword in Lampard's hand. The surprise in his eyes grew thicker as he said, "I could never have thought that a master like you would hide in Chambord Kingdom. Your sword is about 40 pounds heavier than mine, but you are able to strike 3 times more than I. I have to admit that your technique is superior." Humph. Lampard didn't say anything back. However, it's quite unfortunate. Your insane sword technique couldn't save you since you chose the wrong battlefield. A cruel smile appeared on the thin and shout 4-star warrior's face. Bright green dots suddenly flew out of the trees around him and entered his body. Then the 3 deep wounds that were bleeding quickly recovered and disappeared. He laughed proudly. "My warrior energy attribute is wood, the most powerful healing energy attribute there is. Since there are a lot of trees around me, I'm able to absorb the wood energy from the surroundings and recover. Even if you stab me 30 times, 300 times, I could still recover. However, every time I successfully strike you, your strength would decrease a little. Haha. When all the blood inside of you depletes, I will chop your head off and make it my 30th war trophy?" "Too talkative," Lampard's sneer. He didn't move, but the lightning surrounding him grew bigger and bigger. "Haha, you are cool. And I love collecting the heads of cool warriors like you." This Dick loved to talk. He was doing it to attack his opponent's confidence. He squinted his eyes, and small green dots would leave the numerous trees around him and envelop him. Although the trees were drying and dying at a visible speed, the green warrior energy enveloping Dick got stronger and stronger. Dick's energy soon grew bigger than Lampard, and he licked his lips and said, "Next, try to take this strike." Dick moved the swords as he said. A green light appeared on the blade of his sword, and a vivid green dragon head was formed on the blade by his green warrior energy. The dragon opened its mouth, and its sharp teeth was vivid as well. Pressure appeared on Lampard's shoulders as if he was facing a real dragon. Warrior combat technique. Green, light dragon sword. The huge dragon head opened its mouth again, and a huge ancient-looking green sword shot out of it. The sword was about 4 meters long, and it looked very real. It buzzed in the air as it pierced through everything in its way, including trees and rocks. Dust on the ground was also sent into the air as everything struck towards Lampard. It was another high-level warrior combat technique. The warriors of the Imperial Night Palace had great resources, and ordinary 4-star warriors couldn't be compared to them. The technique, Green Light Dragon Sword, had at least double Dick's power, and this strike was on the level of the peak 4-star warrior. It was an insane boost. However, Lampard's face didn't even change color. The huge sword in his hand was now stabbed into the ground. The cracking noise of lightning resonated in the forest as the lightning drew an image of an angry golden lion roaring at the sky behind him. He slowly gasped his right hand and formed a fist around his wrist. This movement seemed to have unbelievable magic. All of the lightning around him instantly condensed onto his right fist as if a whale swallowed all the water in the ocean. Then, a light silver dot appeared on his fist, followed by eye-piercing silver light shining at everything around him. For a moment, even the sunlight was enveloped by this silver light. Dick suddenly felt like his eyes hurt, so he had to close his eyes in order to dodge the light that came from his opponent's right fist. Then he heard the deep roar of the red-haired cool warrior. Lightning, speed, fist. Warrior combat technique? This bumpkin warrior knows warrior combat techniques as well. Dick couldn't believe what he was hearing. He suddenly sensed a great amount of danger as he felt a vast amount of lightning energy dashing towards him. He was shocked, but he wasn't slowed. He unleashed all of his energy and injected all of it into the green light dragon sword. The 4-meter-long green sword instantly grew bigger. Boom! 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 Numerous silver lightning bolts struck the 5-meter-long green dragon sword formed by the warrior energy. Then, crack! 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 A series of light cracking noise sound as Dick was shocked again. He had sensed the collapse of his green dragon sword. When it was struck by the numerous lightning bolts, each lightning bolt broke away a part of the sword at a time. Dick couldn't do anything but to watch his 4-star warrior combat technique get destroyed. Then the residual silver lightning dashed towards him. How? How is this possible? He opened his eye wide, but he wasn't able to catch anything. Too fast. I couldn't track his trace. I couldn't spot his fist. Shit! Dick was so scared that his soul almost flew out of his body. He quickly set up a series of green swords made of his warrior energy for defense, and backed off rapidly. He wanted to dodge the strike, but all of his defensive swords were torn apart like paper. The lightning instantly went through his body, then the world fell into silence again. Can you use your wood energy to repair your crushed heart? Lampard asked coldly. His face was almost next to the terrified face of his opponent. Lampard was still in the position of punching out his right fist, but now his right fist had pierced through Dick's chest. In his right hand, there was a heart that was still pumping slowly. No! Desperation appeared in Dick's eyes as the strength in his body slowly deteriorated. Relax. I don't have the habit of collecting heads. Lampard's voice sounded again. A semi-sad and semi-happy expression appeared in Dick's face, and it seemed like he wanted to say something. However, I will crush my opponent's heart. As Lampard said that, he squeezed his hand. The heart in his hand turned into a bloody pulp. Ho 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 ho. The short and thin Dick was struggling to say something, but his throat could only make a noise akin to a beast roaring with despair. He watched Lampard's arm slowly emerge from his chest. The last expression of his once arrogant face was a look of regret. Then, the sword clattered on the ground. He died as soon as he ceased to breathe. Lampard lightly pushed him, and the cold body fell to the ground. Just then, a sudden burst of fire and flames appeared in the distance, burning half the sky. Lampard was shocked. His body flashed, and appeared on a 100-meter-tall tree the next second. He looked up into the distance. The flames covering the whole prairie were seen. Lampard knew that this was the army leader Brooks' handiwork. However, Lampard was once again anxious. When he thought of the other team, there was a master who was almost at the 4 stars peak. This fire would not have burned that killer, even if more than 1,000 black cavalries would have burned. There were no pros which can contend with the killer beside Brooke. The situation will take a nosedive, as long as the other side charges through the fire sea. He had to help. After a clear whistle, the disappearance of more than 20 Chambord archers out from the woods have appeared under the tree. Lord Lampard, is everyone here? Were there any casualties? Yes, Lord, everyone is here. Everyone else is fine, except Andy and Taylor, who suffered minor injuries. The 250 black cavalry invaders all stayed in the woods. None of them escaped. Good job. But the fight is not over yet. Now divide into 2 groups. You guys go to support Lord Drogba and Lord Pierce immediately. I am going to help Lord Brooke. Remember, the situation is urgent and you must be fast. Lampard looked at the 20 soldiers' faces. Some of them were still bleeding. Although they had the advantage of being on familiar terrain and killed more than 200 black cavalries in the woods, the sacrifices made by the 20 men were also not low. However, Lampard could not think much at this time. He could only speak softly, "Take care." Then with a flash he disappeared instantly. The silver lightning roared out air. Lampard lightning rushed to the distant hills which had the 2-headed dog and axe banner planted on it. At the same time, a string of hurried whistles sounded. The sound of hooves came. The horses that were deserted in the forest had come back again. The bloody Chambord soldiers rode these horses and headed towards the grassy meadow long distance away. In there, their brothers were still in a bloody battle for defending the homeland. Hey, look at the 2 little mice. Where can they escape to? The Black Knight Alan, who had messy grass-like yellow hair, had blue energy flames surging around his body. With one hand, the water blue energy crazily shot towards Drogba and pierced like arrows, forcing them to creep away. Only 2 big asses could be seen between the grass indistinctly, and pools of blood. He was playing a game of cat and mouse, appreciating the opponent's fleeting, desperate scream. "Ha! Stop and take a break. Can you guys still run away with such a severe wound and so much blood spilling out?" Alan's yellow hair was blowing in the wind. He jumped up into the air, looked at the two men running ahead, spread out water blue sword energy, and then sent it like a volley, sweeping up bursts of dust and grass on the ground. The Imperial Knight Alan came with several orders from a powerful figure. Naturally, he was aware that the two people fleeing were important people under the Shamboard King. It would be a great achievement with a big reward if he could kill these two people. Therefore, he does not care that the other Shamboard horse archers had escaped and just chased Drogba and Pierce. After a series of energy bombardments, the grass was covered in blood. There were bloodstains everywhere, and apparently the two guys were badly hurt and shouldn't be able to run any minute now. The chase continued like this. But, after been chasing for more than 10 minutes, gradually, Alan found that something was wrong. Strange. Even if it was two buffaloes, they would die after shedding so much blood. Why are two guys still full of vigor and vitality like mice? Alan stood where he was and pursued no more. Just then, he patted his head and found himself lost in the hay meadow where he had been chasing them. Two cowards. I am going to massacre the whole Shamboard city first. Let's see how long you guys can hide. Alan turned his eyes, shouted loudly deliberately, then turned away. He was not faking it this time, but really had the heart to return. If the two shitty Xianxia did not appear, he would leave. Although there was a credit available for killing these two Xianxia, he would get nothing if his other companions were one step ahead after the capture of the city. They would loot all the treasures. Aha! Don't go. You are really disappointing. We are just having fun. Why do you want to leave? Exactly. You still haven't caught up with us yet? The two tall and muscular people appeared and started laughing. They drilled out from the thick grass behind, quickly chased out and swore at Alan, apparently not satisfied because Alan chickened out. Ahaha! You two cowards! Alan laughed and turned around, still standing. He was about to mercilessly mock the shit out of those two Xianxia, but the word coward didn't even come out from his mouth yet before he was suddenly stunned as he stared at the things that Drogba and Pierce were carrying. It was two headless black cavalry's bodies that couldn't be more dead. The two men shamelessly carried them like chickens in their hands. With a slight appliance of force, blood would spray out onto the ground. How can... You guys... Alan understood a lot of things instantly when he saw the two men laugh wretchedly as if they hit some jackpot. They were clean without any marks, let alone wounds. It was almost clean to the point of being shameless. I was tricked. No wonder he felt that the two men's blood was a bit too much after they were wounded. People would have become a mummy after losing that much blood. How could they still run? You guys cannot be forgiven. You should die 10,000 times. Alan growled. Paul, look. The yellow kid seems to be mad at us. Drogba smiled proudly. How was my idea? He asked a question and answered himself. Haha. I'm a fucking genius. Didier. I've became naughty too now after following you. Capricorn Xianxia Pierce laughed. You're all gonna die for me. Alan was extremely angry. His head was smoking. His eyes were firing. His ears puffed white steam. Water blue energy flamed and soared all surround him. The sounds of waves crashing against the shore came from the flame. The sharp sword became controlled by an invisible power. Suddenly, it spun furiously and a faint water energy ripple started spreading out from the center. Two stinking rats, you really piss me off. The sword wrapped in a blue energy turned into a lightning, suddenly shot out countless air sword cuts in the sky. The 2 meters tall grass around them was mowed down. The sword light cut more quickly, more and more sharp, finally to a point uncapturable by the naked eye. The sound of the tides made it sound as if they were all in the vast ocean. Energy technique, furious 1,000-layer wave. Alan shouted, waving his swords again and again. In a moment, the sound of the tide was loud, like deafening roars. The sword lights all over the sky suddenly appeared all at once, forming a wave-like sword web, charging directly towards Drogba and Pierce from all sides. "Ah, well, this guy is angry." Drogba screamed and cried out suddenly, "Long live your majesty, Taurus St. Cloth. Come to me." As the words rolled, something strange happened. They saw his cow-like body suddenly float like there was no more gravity. Then a black light from his forehead came out and became a black iron box. The iron box above the seal had a lively running pattern of Taurus. At the next moment the iron box opened and the golden light burst out, and a huge black steel bull rushed out of it. It split into 125 armor parts instantly, as if they were blessed with a soul. They all changed into golden flames, automatically flying in the air and finally landing on the body of Drogba. At the moment that everything finished, a huge golden ox totem consisting of 125 dazzling stars appeared as if it was breaking through the black space. They flashed behind Drogba mysteriously. The giant cow's body had a vast and mysterious surging scent of ancient breath. When it proudly roared, the force was almost unbearable to the point of forcing bystanders to kneel down in worship. "Damn, you wild buffalo, this is going to be bad," Pierce complained. However, he seemed very excited. He raised his arms and shouted, "Star power, Capricorn St. Cloth, befall!" As soon as his voice shouted, almost the same thing occurred to him. An iron chest that had a vivid symbol of the Capricorn on it appeared from a black light that dashed out of his forehead. The iron chest opened itself up automatically as flames appeared around it. What dashed out of the chest was a valiant metal goat. This metal goat instantly turned into 50 pieces and covered every single part of Pierce's body. As the flames disappeared, a strange-looking black armor appeared on him, and a totem of a huge demon-like goat with sharp horns formed from 50 stars appeared behind him, letting out an angry roar. This totem seemed like it had pierced through space and time and appeared here as it had an ancient and vast presence. "What is this?" Alan opened his eyes as he couldn't understand what he was seeing. At this second, the two strongmen, without a hint of pride or honor, transformed in front of him like a miracle and turned to warriors of gods, with strange suits of armor enveloping them. It seemed like these two men stepped through space and time and appeared in front of him. Alan couldn't describe what he was feeling, but he felt like these two men were like gods, mighty and majestic. Alan had heard a lot of mysterious events when he was in the Imperial Night Palace, and he had experienced the devastating power of moon-ranked warriors summoning their warrior weapon. However, what he just witnessed was far beyond his understanding. Tink, 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 tink. The blue net was instantly made from sword strikes, and it struck towards the two men mercilessly as if it was an unavoidable punishment from God. However, the scene of the armor tearing and blood spurting didn't occur like Alan imagined. Alan was shocked. He opened his eyes wide in surprise as he witnessed his strike making a series of crisp sounds. The strike didn't even leave marks on the armors, let alone tear them up. The sounds the strike made sounded like the wind playing with the purple chimes hanging by the window of a goddess bedroom, crisp and pleasing. How is this possible? Then, damn, what is that armor made of? After seeing his most powerful strike not even leaving light marks on the black armors, as if a bucket of water smashed onto a piece of rock, Alan's expression seemed like he had just saw a ghost during daytime. In the next moment, his opponent's counterattack arrived. Yellow-haired punk. Take this. Gigantic. Long horn. Drogba lowered his head and dashed towards Alan in a weird pose. Both of his hands were placed on his chest as if he was going to headbutt Alan. His figure instantly dashed through the air as if he was an arrow. With his body aimed at Alan's chest, Drogba had an indescribable, horrifying presence around him. "Ha ha ha! You expect to pierce through my warrior energy defense with that?" After a moment of surprise, Alan laughed out loud. The warrior energy on this opponent was only about a mid-tier 2-star. It basically posed no threat to him. Alan didn't move. He only formed a light shield with his warrior energy to protect his body behind it. Water-attributed warrior energy were best at defense. Then give Daddy's attack a try. Drogba's shoulder smashed onto Alan's shield. The light shield lightly indented as it easily blocked Drogba's attack. The forceful strike only made Alan back off for a few steps, but his shield made of his warrior energy was still firm and sound. When he wanted to laugh, he suddenly felt very weak. He felt like his warrior energy wasn't moving inside his body smoothly. Shit! I overused my warrior energy? Alan's face changed color. Break! Drogba's careless smile disappeared from his face as he seemed earnest as ever. He suddenly shouted as his shoulder struck forward again. As the ground was about to be torn apart by his feet, a subtle ancient star power instantly appeared and dismantled the blue energy shield in front of him. Crack! 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 The shield made from 4-star warrior energy was shattered under the struck from a 2-star warrior energy. It is really strange. However, your attack stops here. Alan was surprised to see this, but he wasn't terrified. He forced the warrior energy that wasn't running smoothly inside his body to envelop his fist and punched onto Drogba's chest. He knew his sword couldn't pierce through his opponent's armor, so he wanted to destroy his opponent's internal organs and bones through sending his power through the armor. Puff dash! Drogba spat out a mouthful of blood, and all of it poured onto Alan's face. Although the Taurus Saint Cloth was able to decrease the force from an attack, the difference in power between him and Alan was too great. The difference between a 2-star warrior and a 4-star warrior was great, and Drogba couldn't fully utilize the power of his Saint Cloth. Getting injured was unavoidable. But at this moment, Saint Sword Excalibur, followed by a loud shout, an unparalleled sharp sword energy appeared from the back. Drogba, who was spitting out blood, suddenly grabbed onto Alan with his hands and turned around forcefully when he heard the shout. After using the Hulk potion, the physical strength of the strongman made the 4-star warrior Alan change position with him forcefully. Whoosh! An invisible sword energy dashed by. Then, a moment of silence. Ha ha ha! Ha ha ha! It's useless. The power of a 4-star warrior couldn't be imagined by 2 idiots like you guys. Even if you coincidentally broke my energy shield, you couldn't break. Huh! Alan, who was laughing like a madman, suddenly froze. A vague numb yet itchy sensation appeared around his waist. He looked down and realized that his metal armor from Imperial Night Palace was cut in half, and his skin was exposed. On his skin, a series of dense blood dots like small pearls formed a straight line. Drogba, who was holding on to him, was still spitting out blood from his mouth. It seemed like his injury was more severe than the man he was holding. But when Drogba let go of Alan and fell to the ground, Alan, who was standing, let out a desperate cry like a wild animal. Clouds of blood mist spurted out of his waist, and his body, with the field of dry grass 2 meters tall behind him, were both cut in half cleanly. Such a fast sword, such a sharp sword energy. Ha! You guys won. Alan, whose upper body was now on the ground, said that with the last breath he had. After that, he closed his eyes and died unwillingly. Until his death, he still couldn't understand why his bug-like opponents were able to have that mysterious and power-black armors, why the black-haired strong man could break his energy shield, why that sharp sword energy could chop his body that was protected under the 4-star water-attributed warrior energy. Drogba, you okay? You are not dead yet, right? After taking care of his opponent, Pierce quickly walked to Drogba as he asked with care. Cough, cough. You damn heartless white-haired punk. You really dared to use that strike. What if your sword chopped me in half as well? Drogba was severely injured. He coughed up blood as he said, Shiz, you can still swear? Hee. Looks like you are okay. Pierce let go of the breath that he was holding. He laughed as he took out a bottle of red-colored potion and poured it into Drogba's mouth. Didn't you come up with this idea? You said you could hold on to this yellowed-haired bastard so he couldn't dodge, so I can use my saint's sword to chop him up. On top of that, you are wearing the Taurus Saint Cloth that His Majesty gave you. My sword couldn't harm you, Pierce said. As the light red-colored potion entered Drogba's stomach, it came to effect. Drogba's wounds were quickly recovering. Drogba exhaled as a rare, serious expression appeared on his face. That's right. Thank God His Majesty gave us these armors. Otherwise, we could see what the Grim Reaper looks like for real. This 4-star warrior is so powerful. If we didn't waste some of his warrior energy, Both of us wouldn't be a match to him. Compared with his majesty, we are too weak. We have to get fast quick in order to follow his steps. Pierce sighed as he remembered Faye used to chop up 4-star warriors like cabbages and cakes. We have to go support Mr. Brook. He is facing the most pressure. Drogba got up and whistled loudly. A series of neighs sounded as 2 level 4 roaring flame beasts dashed to them through the tall grass. Both Drogba and Pierce jumped onto their mounts and charged at Brook's direction. Kill dash. When he was less than 10 meters away from the small hill, the furious scar-faced knight leader leaped into the air using the momentum from his horse and chopped down at the soldiers on the hill like a huge bird with eye-piercing silver flames around him. Dashes of huge silver sword energy flew towards the hill like flying snakes. Back! Brook shouted and commanded the soldiers who were charging forward to back off. At the same time, he drew from the warrior energy inside of him and waved his swords to block the attack. However, most of the sword-shaped energies were aimed towards him, and there was no way for him to block all of the ferocious strikes from the scar-faced man. A series of puffing noises sounded as numerous wounds appeared on his body. Blood was spurting into the air and formed several terrifying flowers made out of blood. The difference of power between the two were so great that Brook was covered in his own blood after one encounter. However, the military leader of Chambord didn't back off as he bit his teeth and stood still. Because behind him, the last dozen former mine slaves hadn't passed the stone bridge. Ha ha ha. Is that so? Are those dirty slaves the reason why you guys won't back off? The scar-faced knight was very smart. He knew what was going on when he saw the scene on the stone bridge. A cruel smile appeared on his face as he said, I shall let you witness how the stuff and people that you are trying to protect turns into ashes and smokes. Ha ha ha. He was set back continuously so the hatred on his mind reached its max. As he said that, he shook his sword and sent out a few more silver sword-shaped energy. He wanted to cut off Brook's limbs and capture him alive. He wanted Brook to witness Chambord Castle burning down in flames, and chop off the head of this stubborn commander of Chambord to vent all of his anger and frustration. Brook held his sword tightly as he still didn't back off. However, his injuries were quite severe and it was hard for him to move. He didn't have a single master around him. Lampard, Drogba, and Pierce were all sent out by him to distract the invaders and the other 4-star warriors. They had not returned, and his own life was in great danger. But at this moment whoosh, 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 for fire magic arrows with terrifying magic surge on them suddenly appeared and struck the silver sword-shaped energy accurately. As booming noise resonated in the sky, both the fire arrows and the sword energy exploded, and a visible energy wave rushed to the surroundings like an enlarging circle. A master? Who? The scar-faced knight leader was shocked. How can Chambord Kingdom retain such a master? After entering the Empire's territory, the expeditionary force began moving at a much slower rate. On one hand, it was to wait for Lampard and the others to return to the main army. On the other hand, Faye was very curious about everything in the Empire. Unlike the jurisdiction of the subsidiary countries, the Zenith Empire was a vast territory. It was divided into 7 provinces. Within each province was several cities, which were far more eminent than Chambord City, as both the military and administrative system were considered perfectly executed. This was set to be Faye's target for development. In order to develop a strong city like Chambord, simply relying on the level of knowledge of someone who was an otaku during his past life was definitely not feasible. When the sunset was about to arrive, the Chambord expedition and the Soros caravan arrived at the Ernst province of the Empire. A broader river located far away snarly cut off the connection between the north and the south. There was an old city near the river, which was more than 10 times the size of Chambord. This was called the first military's hot spring gate checkpoint in the northern area of the Empire. Through the ferry across the river, in accordance with the imperial law, the subsidiary army was not allowed to enter the city. Also, the expeditionary forces could only camp on the outside of the river and send people into the city to purchase food supplies. Faye took Angela and Emma on a trip to search for a gentle flow side of the river for fishing. The blonde female swordsman Susan, who was next to the elder princess, suddenly came over. The elder princess will take her leave now? When Faye heard the words from the female swordsman Susan, he went into a daze. Yes, your majesty, now we have entered the territory of the empire. Arshavin, the highness prince, has sent someone to meet us. He will soon arrive at the hot spring gate before sunset. Now the situation is complicated. Therefore the elder princess must go back as soon as possible. She replied patiently with her long blonde hair. The proud female swordsman, like a peacock, had a surprisingly good attitude, and was also very respectful towards Faye. Actually, the reason causing this shift was also very simple. During the Twin Tower battle, Faye mysteriously defeated the Imperial Knight who was one of the 10 Execution Knight honored as the Golden Sun Knight, Chris Sutton. Because of the victory, Faye's status also increased a lot since then. Within the Empire, the strong ones were respected, and that was the common rule of the game. Although female swordsman Susan was not very flexible herself, the elder princess mentioned the point so she could finally understand. The rise of Chambord's king was unstoppable, regardless of it being strength or power. Faye already had what he needed for people like the elder princess to show their respect. Well, if this is the situation at this point, then she can go. The golden sunset was sprinkled with glitter splendor, and Faye suddenly felt a sense of loss. He thought, this is really strange. The elder princess and I saw each other for only 3 times. Even the closest interaction we had was just sitting face to face and eating a meal on a stone table once. That was not even considered a serious date either because I robbed her bowl. Why do I have this kind of feeling? Perhaps I got used to seeing the pair of dark blue eyes that have been staring at me in the distance away for these several days? Faye smiled with mixed emotions. At that moment, the noisy camp suddenly quieted down. Princess Xianxia, who had never been seen before, suddenly walked out of the magic carriage, and her sky-blue-colored dress was trailing on the ground, with a dreamy print, and her smooth linen hair reflected the glow of the sunset. She seemed like a vulnerable woman who wouldn't look like one of the important characters in a story, but she had a charm that no one could match, so all of the eyes in the whole camp were focused on her. She gently walked to the edge of the river and stopped in front of Faye. Looked at the shimmering river, the wise woman, who had a smile on her face for the first time in front of Faye, seemed to have no idea how to open her mouth and say something. After a long time, she said, "Thank you for the medicine, King Alexander." Faye had not yet noticed after these words, but the knight Captain Romain and the female swordsman Susan were instantly stunned. In their memory, their royal princess had never said this type of nonsense. What's the matter with her today? At this moment, the loud sound of horseshoes clopping against the ground came from far, far away. The crowd looked back and saw that a group of about 500 men and women in the distance were riding along the bank of the river. Each carried a great deal of swagger, and a few of the knights were holding up a long banner. The flag of the empire displaying the double head of the white bear was remarkable. Besides that, it was the sign of the invincible division called the Iron Blood Camp of the Zenith's god of war formed by Andrew Arshavin. On the flag was the double axe of the Iron Camp, with a black and white mark. The flag was like the dragon in the wind. This was the Imperial Knight troop that Prince Arshavin sent to pick up the elder princess to go back to the empire capital. Along the way, what happened was actually quite interesting. This trip to Chambord went far beyond my expectations. The princess had a relaxed feeling appear on her cheek. She smiled and said, "But, King Alexander, you have done a lot of things in the Blackstone Kingdom that goes against the imperial law, and it will not be so easy to get away from that. I am afraid that there will be some people who are going to look for you over these things besides Golden Knight Sutton," said the princess with a shy little smile, looking at Faye. "If someone don't know what their position's at, then I will use my fist to speak instead of my mouth." Faye smiled proudly. In Azeroth, violence may be a good choice, but it also can't solve every problem. The strength of your majesty now is also completely no match against the empire that occupied the great powers for hundreds of years. The royal princess was speaking so many words for the first time and seemed to be a little bit tired. She paused to breath for a few seconds. She was wearing the female version of Caribbean clothing designed by Faye for all the women in the Chambord city in order to make the body figure of the women looked even more charming. Although the princess was sick for a long time, she still looked as beautiful and fabulous. She patted herself on the chest, then looked at Faye's eyes, and she said earnestly, "Your Majesty, you are also the king of the exquisites, even better than me and Paris. Why should you always pretend to be a fool who is only interested in fighting and killing?" Faye smiled and thought, pretending to be a sheep but killing the wolf is quite an interesting thing to do. How can people like you understand the feelings that comes with this? You are the kind of person who like to keep everything in your hands. Seeing that Faye did not reply, the elder princess didn't really mind too. Her right hand gathered the long hair that was flowing in the wind, and her left hand reached out from her sleeve. A red pentagonal small iron piece appeared in her soft palm. This small iron piece was obviously held for a long time. The color was smooth, glittering with light. If one carefully observed, one could discover that it was also engraved with a few complicated runes with unknown meanings. Faye figured out these were not magical symbols. This red iron piece may be able to help you in the future. It will count as my appreciation for your medicine, the elder princess said. Disregarding the knight Captain Romaine and the female swordsman Susan's shocked expressions and anxious attempts to stop her, the elder princess tossed the trinket. The light throw created a red light arc in the air. The small iron was thrown directly to Faye. Faye caught it using his backhand. The red color pentagonal iron piece started to warm up in his hands. The feeling was like a 100-years-old piece of warm jade that was smooth and soft. Not the feeling of iron at all. With a moment of surprise in his heart, he carefully observed to think for a while, and discovered that besides the engraved words on the one side, the other side of the red iron had a mountain surrounded by mist printed in a scroll figure, which was pretty interesting. Faye could tell this small iron plate was probably from an extraordinary origin, and it had a mysterious meaning. He thought for a while, looked up and laughed. "I thank your Royal Highness for this. Thank you. I appreciate it." Suddenly he got an idea in his mind. He took out a large bottle, full recovery potion, and handed it to the Princess Royal, smiled and said, "Angela told me that the medicine was helpful to your recovery. This is my last bottle. At a day of departure like today, I will give this to you as a gift." The elder princess smiled gently. Her blue eyes rippled and she did not refuse. She asked Susan to take the medicine. Faye opened his inventory space again and then took out 2 copies of the manuscript. After slight pause, he gave it to the princess too and explained, "The first record of the manuscript is a fast healing potion recipe. You remember that day I was at the top of the eastern mountain top and was injured badly. I could quickly recover my body because of this medicine, but the configuration success rate is not high. The second manuscript is just the formula of the potion I gave you. Later, if you still need the medicine to maintain in a good condition, you can give to the pharmacist directly in the palace to make some more. The required material is also very simple, however. The success rate is not high either." A surprised look appeared in the elder Princess Tanasha's eyes. She carefully collected the 2 manuscripts and sighed, "Your Majesty, you are indeed wise. I'm afraid that you already guessed that one day in the future, His Majesty Arshavin will come to you to ask for these 2 magic potions, so you wanted to borrow my hands to give it to him." Faye smiled a little. That day at the top of the eastern mountain top, Faye already had to use both the life potion of healing and full recover potion in front of the public. He realized that these 2 kinds of medicine's magical effect would surely get people's attention, especially people like Arshavin who were ambitious at heart. He absolutely knew the function and meaning of the potion, and deeply remembered it. Although at that moment he did not immediately ask for the medicine since the situation was complicated, sooner or later, he would definitely ask for it. Rather than waiting for him to come knocking on the door and asking arrogantly for it, it was better to be a little clever and offer it himself, and that would make both sides feel better. However, having brought the medicine recipe from the Diablo world to reality, the medicine would obviously face a certain level of variation. Faye and Sister Ankara gradually mastered the new formula. Faye, naturally, did not give all the secrets to other people. He had prepared the 2 pharmaceutical formulations for the princess, which, as he said, even if all the ingredients were gathered, the success rate would still be low, even less than 5%. And because the principle was still the principal system from the Diablo world, even the master pharmacist could not see the secret of the potion. This was why Faye had formulated the recipe and gave it to Arshavin by the hand of the elder princess. Some things would seem more credible if it was given through the elder princess's hand. Princess Tanasha, I have a question that I have been wanting to ask you. Faye flew off the subject. Go ahead. I've always been curious, are you really a master? Faye asked earnestly. A hint of surprise passed through the elder princess's blue eyes. It seemed that she never expected Faye would ask such a weird question. After a moment of silence, she chose not to answer. Instead, she turned around and walked towards the magic carriage in the distance. Then, the arrogant and callous silver armor knight troops that were waiting for the princess rushed into Chambord's battalion. Very cautiously, they escorted the princess onto the magical carriage, not bothering to greet Faye nor linger in the battalion, and spurred forward to the hot spring gate. As the troops passed by, the air resounded with smoke and dust. However, when the magical carriage gently passed by Faye, the tightly closed window opened for him. The elder princess looked at Faye through the window with a strange smile. Her lips were slightly open and she wordlessly exclaimed, "No!" Or at least this was what Faye concluded by looking at her lips. The scar-faced knight leader looked to where the magic arrow flew from and shouted angrily, "Who's there? Show yourself." An extremely beautiful figure was approaching from the distant golden grassland as if a goddess descended from the sky. It seemed like she was walking in slow motion when in fact she was moving at a great speed. She arrived at the mountain of the hills in an instant with her hands holding a mysteriously powerful bough with the form of the branches of a dead rose. Without a word, she went and stood behind Brooke. The scar-faced knight leader was surprised by how young she was. The strange woman looked to be in her 20s. She was gorgeous and had a great figure. Her legs are slim and long. Her waist was soft and flexible and her fair skin blemish-free as if it was delicately made by jade. Her fiery red hair flowed like a flame burning in the wind. The armor on her appeared unbelievably strong. It was engraved with some mysterious and profound inscriptions, covered by marvelous light, and it emanated an aura of great mystical power. He likened her to a sacred goddess of martial prowess. "Who are you?" he said ambivalently. Within such a short period of time, he was shocked that he was not capable of perceiving how strong this young woman was. Even more curiously, it appeared her magic element power was constantly changing. It was sometimes cold as ice, sometimes hot as fire, sometimes swift as lightning, sometimes gloomy as poison. What kind of power was this? "Elena, soldier of Chambord," the woman responded calmly. Although Gordon Brooke was covered in blood, he felt less restless after her appearance. He knew this stunning and powerful female rogue archer for sure, because he had seen Faye accompanied by her a lot. Though he had no idea where this woman came from, he knew that she was the king's most trusted person and her archery was unbeatable. Brooke remembered once Faye spoke about her and sighed that even the king himself was no match for her. A truly benevolent force to be reckoned with. "Your Honor, be careful. He is a really tough one." Brooke warned Elena cautiously. Brooke didn't know her position in Chambord, but she was always with the king. Since he respected the king, he chose to refer to her respectfully. Elena raised her lethal rose bow without a backward glance and said, "You be careful as well." Then she concentrated on bending her bow. 3 arrows made of frost magic appeared on her pale blue bowstring, the tips of her deadly arrows shining brightly. The body of her arrows were extremely cold, spilling white cold condensation in all directions and lowering the temperature rapidly. Hush, her magic arrows shot swift as lightning and as powerful as thunder. The battle has begun. Damn! This woman is also a soldier of the King of Chambord. Who the hell is this King of Chambord? Where the hell did he come from? Why on earth does he have such a beautiful and powerful soldier? The scar-faced knight leader swore beneath his breath. He dared not to be off guard. Powering up his silver chi, he fired his silver sword pulses towards the enemy. Hong hong hong. The frost arrow clashed with the silver sword pulses again. The fusion was creating tremendous bursts of energy which destroyed everything it encountered. Elena bent her bow calmly with her beautiful hands, as elegantly as if she was playing a harp. When she plucked, various magic arrows were fired at an incredible speed. No one could ever trace their passage. It was hard to believe that even a man like the scar-faced knight leader, who possessed a 4-star premium swift edge chi and 20 years of battlefield experience, still could not get within 10 meters of her. The silver sword pulses and the magic frost arrows were constantly colliding and bursting. This woman, she's not only strangely powerful, her control of pace is unbelievably accurate too. It's like she's been through thousands of battles. Her moves are so cold-blooded, striking fear with every blow. Little did he know, Elena, as a female rogue fighter, had survived the world of Diablo. From the day she was able to defend the rogue encampment with her bow, she had to fight against thousands of devils and monsters. There were countless moments that she was about to die, but eventually she fought back and survived. That's why an experienced soldier like him, who had only fought against humans, could never compare with her. For the moment, neither could gain the upper hand. In the meantime, around 400 Black Knights, led by their kings, who barely survived the fire, had mounted the hill and were going in to attack Chambord. "Charge!" Brooke shouted angrily and was the first to charge. His body was enhanced by a large dose of Hulk potion, augmenting his healing ability to extraordinary levels. He regained more than half of his strength just from resting briefly. It might still be quite meaningless when facing a master like the Scar-faced Knight, but he would be a god when fighting against normal soldiers. He brandished his sword, beheading 2 knights simultaneously. The knight's blood was splattered everywhere. "Charge! Destroy the enemy! Leave no survivors!" Brooke's heroic energy sent the blood of those 20-something bylaw enforcement officers pulsing through their veins. Each wielded a huge axe used as both weapon and shield, and then pushed forward. Although the enemy was several times greater in number, they fought them zealously like the wind. All of a sudden, a shower of blood fell on the hill and the ground was covered with corpses and broken weapons. These bylaw enforcement officers had never experienced such a brutal slaughter scene, but they had been in a battle before and had some inklings of such a deadly atmosphere. Also, Faye built an arena in the mysterious city of the grotto located in the back of Chambord Mountain, where he summoned fallens and fallen priests. Each bylaw enforcement officer, secretly enhanced with the Hulk potion, had to fight against these monsters in the arena. As a result, when they finally stepped into the real battlefield, they were proud, strong, and fearless. Where once there were 23 men brandishing axes suddenly became 23 furious sharks killing anything that's in their way. The 400 Black Knights could not defeat these 23 sharks in a short period of time, so the fight was bogged down to a dreary stalemate. "Charge! Charge forward! Conquer Chambord City!" Under the protection of his guard, the leader shouted wildly. "Fuck you!" A bylaw enforcement officer covered in blood yelled and brandished his axe, cutting the guards protecting the leader in half. "Well done!" Another bylaw enforcement officer, whose body was still pierced by an arrow, turned around and swung at the Black Knights. The blood of the 2 Black Knights and their horses who were coming at him bursted as they were cut into 8 pieces. Brooke was in the front lines of the fight. He kept brandishing his sword of the king bestowed by Faye. An enemy was slain every time he swung his sword. He wouldn't stop until he killed all the enemy who came within the sweep of his sword. No one could ever counter him. He exhausted his energy furiously, and it was getting easier, showing a sign of overcoming the 2-star level. "Soldiers of Chambord, destroy the enemy with me. We'd rather die than give up," Brooke shouted madly. "Rather die than give up." Bylaw enforcement officers responded to their general by shouting out their determination, even in the midst of the intense fight. These 23 people sounded even more powerful than their enemy. The whole world was drenched in blood. The sun could not bear the slaughter any longer. It gradually went down and disappeared. The time of darkness would begin. The Black Knights gradually started to retreat in a disorderly fashion. Shocked by the madness of the enemy, they could no longer be brave. These people of Chambord were crazy. They didn't feel pain when they got hurt. Instead they laughed, shouted loudly, and swung their axes. Even if they were all covered in blood and wounds, they would not back off as long as they were still alive. There was no difference between fighting this kind of enemy and fighting devils. These three kings were under great pressure now, even though their guards were still protecting them. They looked at each other. Then their faces started to turn pale. They were afraid, as they couldn't help but start to think that they shouldn't have provoked this enemy. The king of Chambord and his soldiers were all aberrant barbarians. Suddenly there came an unpleasant, angry voice. Rather die than give up? Just a group of contemptible criminals. All of you shall die here. Accompanying the voice was someone storming out of the dark remains of the fire. He, enveloped in the light of his orange energy, was flying towards the battlefield with a sound that resembled thunder reverberating across the sky. Before him arrived the pulses of his sword. The world split apart and the air is loaded with smoke and dust. Brook, who was in the front line of the fight, bore the brunt of his power. Brook felt like a mountain was going to smash him in the face as the ground trembled. He became overcome by the stranger's powers.